Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Alex Moscow. Hi, Alex.
Hi there, Addie. How are you?
I'm doing great. And we owe this introduction to Marcus Kalkid, which I also interviewed for my podcast. And we had a great episode discussing all about sales and Marcus's very unique approach, which I recommended our listeners listen to. And we're going to include that episode in the link to the episode in the show notes. But Alex, let's now introduce you. Thank you for being on this podcast.
It's great to be here, Addie. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. All right, so why don't you tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
Sure. It's interesting that you started your introduction talking about thought leaders, because that's kind of my job. I started in public relations 25 years ago. And my job when I started was working with very large organizations, specifically with their senior teams and the leaders of those businesses, and building their media profiles. And what I would do is sit with them and we'd have good conversations. I'd ask questions and essentially understand what they knew that would be of interest to their market. My job was then to package that stuff up, sell it into media, and get media interviews for these people. I'd go out for lunch, have good conversations, and out the back of it, generate coverage that would build their media profile, attract ideal customers to their businesses. And I got good at it. Had a lot of very nice lunches. Thank you very much. But actually, so when you're working in PR, you work with very large businesses, but you also work with growing businesses and those people that don't have the kind of brand equity that the very large businesses do. And when I started out, the media, as it was, the traditional media, newspapers, broadcast, they owned the platform. There was no social media. There was no internet to kind of democratize voice. And so, the media tended to lean heavily into the very largest brands because that's who their audiences, their readers, their listeners were interested in. So getting coverage and media profile, building thought leadership for growing brands, let's say, was much harder because if the editor or the journalist didn't know the brand name, they were less inclined to speak to them. But I realized that just because you're from a smaller brand, let's say, didn't mean that you had anything less interesting to say. In fact, you probably had something of more interest to say because you were right there in the trenches. You'd built a career, you'd learned lessons, you had information and insight that people needed to know. So I ran the same process for the business owners of these growing brands, packaged up what they knew, what they'd learned over their careers, and using a process that we've developed over the last 25 years, got them more coverage sometimes than their much bigger competitors. In fact, sometimes their competitors would phone them up and say, how are you getting all this coverage? What's happening here? And really, it's just about leveraging this asset that a lot of businesses don't, which is the stuff you've learned over your career that people need to know.
Good. So let's talk about that. So if we have an entrepreneur listening to us right now and they want to tap into that asset, what they learned, how can they do that?
So, and that's a great question. And it's the critical question, right? So realistically, it's about asking yourself good questions. So when we think about thought leadership and auditing, I like to think of it as auditing your brain, right? Because it's all in there. But in order to bring it out, you've got to give yourself hooks and links that you can kind of hook into that will help you access that information. So really, it's about understanding the key points in your career when you have learned lessons, when you have when you've been confronted with difficult situations that you've had to overcome, when you've looked at the way things are done in your industry, and you can see that there are better ways of doing it, more efficient ways of doing it, right? Where being an expert really is about focus. It's about narrowing field of vision. It's about
So how would
understanding.
one know that they're actually an expert, other than deciding that they are an expert? What would be some of the indicators that will show that they're actually an expert?
Right. And to my mind, this is the big issue, right? If you've been doing what you've been doing for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years even, and you're good at it, and you're getting great results, and you've got a process that works, and you've got clients that love you, you're an expert. You just don't know it yet. And your market probably doesn't know it yet because you're not communicating these things to your market. A go-to expert isn't somebody who has expertise. A go-to expert is somebody who the market acknowledges has the right kind of
So
insights.
give me an example of somebody who is go-to expert.
Seth Godin, right? All these people that you're seeing, I mean, the internet has been incredible to democratize access, right, and distribution, right? So, I mean, it's not quite as easy as this, but all the tools are in front of anybody to kind of position themselves and claim an audience, right? What these guys, your Seth Godins of the world, are excellent at is packaging up what they know and delivering it in a way that engages, gets people excited. I mean, let's talk about what doesn't work, first of all, because I think that is useful to kind of help people move away from what they're potentially doing that isn't helping them, right? The biggest issue that I find when I speak to any business who wants to grab an audience, build value, get profile, and attract ideal clients is that they're always doing the same thing. They believe that the thing that they've built, that the product, the service is the thing that attracts their audience, and it isn't. What attracts an audience is the certainty that you can get them to where they want to be. And the way that you do that is to tell stories and provide information that demonstrate the relevance of your experience, the sharpness of your expertise, and the outcomes, the positive outcomes that you've been able to create for people just like them, right? So I always say this, when you're writing a website, when you're doing it's a website in particular, right? So a website, everybody thinks should be a window onto their wares. So you go onto any website and it focuses on this is our product, this is why the product's great, this is why you should buy it, and this is why you should buy from us, right? But that's not what a website should be. A website should be a mirror through which your market can see themselves reflected back. And the reason I know this is if you are walking down, just say you're walking down the street on holiday and there's all these restaurants and you're trying to pick which restaurant is right for you, right? You don't go down and look at the food. The first thing you do is you look at the people in the restaurant. Do those people look like me? Yes, they do. Is the restaurant packed? Yes, it is, right? Does the decor look like somewhere where I'd be comfortable? Yes. Okay. Then you go in and you almost feel that certainty that the food's going to be right for you, right? Because there's people like you in there having
You
a
feel
good
at
time.
home, you feel like it's something that you want to be close to. Yes.
Right. So your website should do the same thing. It should somebody looking at a website should go, wow, I recognize myself in the clients that you have. I recognize myself in the problems that you solve. I recognize myself in the results that you create for your clients, right? Those are the key things, right? Not the benefits or the features of your thing, because when you over leverage the features and benefits of your thing, you just look like everyone else because realistically, your features and benefits are going to be very similar to most of the other people operating in your market, right? It's very difficult to generate differentiation in features. Even Apple, with its billions of dollars, struggles to find differentiation. You know, your iPhone doesn't have anything particularly different from an Android phone, right? People buy into Apple for very different reasons than the actual technology. They buy into it because of community, because of what the brand means to them, right? The thing itself, the device itself, is almost secondary to the reasons that they bought. On the whole, some people buy Apple phones because they love the technology. There's lots of different people, but ultimately it's about community. It's about belonging. It's about how does that brand make me feel? And that's why they buy, right? So, and it's the same in B2B. I mean, this is the biggest misconception ever, and we're actually starting to see a massive shift in B2B. It's almost like B2C, consumer, well, that's all about the feels, right? But B2B, well, that's professional, it's serious, so it must be about how you think and logic, right? But it isn't. People buy B2B products and services in exactly the same way that they buy B2C. It's very emotional, right? It's typically fear-based, and it's all about feels, right? Does this company feel right to
Right.
me?
And Alex, you're spot on in terms of like, your website should represent who you are. So, and that is part of creating yourself as an expert, right? You are the go-to expert because I go to that website and I have that feeling of confidence that I'm going to get the right answer. So I agree with you. So let's take that a little bit farther. Like, how can we be proactive to establish ourselves as experts?
Right. So, okay. So let's go in a little bit more detail about auditing your brain, right? So first of all, you've got to work out what it is that you know that your market needs to know, right? What is the information that they don't currently have that they need that will help drive momentum in their business? Because that's what everybody wants. That's why everybody buys. They don't wake up in the morning and say, I want an accountant today. They wake up and say, I need to get my finances in order, right? I need to get my tax affairs sorted. So how do I find the right accountant who's not only going to give me the right, who's going to sort these affairs out for me, but it's going to give me the right tax advice so that I'm, paying only as much tax as I should and everything else is efficient, all that kind of stuff, right? So how do you do that? Well, there's a number of different ways that you do it. So these are kind of the buckets that I was talking about earlier. A powerful bucket is to look at what is the traditional wisdom that's being communicated in the market that people are taking on board because they've always been told that they should be doing things in a certain way, right? And that this is the way things are done. And then what is it that you've learnt in your career that can help overturn that information, right? Can actually, if you look at science in particular, paradigms that we always thought were set in stone are being overturned every single day because of new information, right? So what is the new information that you've gathered through the process of doing your job that helps to destabilize or even overturn some of that traditional wisdom that everybody uses, right? That actually is no longer applicable or was never applicable. It's just been passed down for so often that everybody's just taken it as read, right? Or what is the beliefs that people have? And I'll give you a good example of this. What are the beliefs that people have, right, that they are operating on that are untrue? Right? And how do you demonstrate that they're untrue and actually they're not helping them? And that actually new information can help them push them forward. So I'll give you an example. In my work, people think that they're not having an impact because there's so much noise in the market, right? So they've tried email campaigns, they might have been writing blog articles, they've been doing stuff on LinkedIn, right? And nothing happens. Right. So they come to me and say, oh, we need to get in the media. Why? Because if we get in the media, we'll get in front of hundreds of thousands of new potential customers and people will see why we're great and they'll just come. Right. To be fair, the media can work that way. It's fine. But their assumption of too much noise is untrue. Right. It is true that there's a lot of noise in the marketplace, but it is also true that there's a lot of white noise in the marketplace. And the challenge they've got is not the noise, but the fact that they are adding to the white noise because they are going out there, they're trying to sell, they're over leveraging on products and services, they're trying to educate the market why they should buy from them, right? And why these products and services are so fantastic, right? But it's not serving them because everybody else is doing it. We don't like being sold to, right? As customers. So what we've done is we've got this amazing ability to ignore it. So it doesn't matter how much of this stuff you pump through, it doesn't matter which distribution channel or platform you use, it's just adding to the white noise. So what you need is something that's going to cut through, right? And what cuts through? Valuable information that people believe in, that will help them solve a problem they've got or help move them forward towards an objective they want to achieve. And that is why your experience and expertise is so powerful and so valuable, because it's that tool, it's that signal that cuts through the noise, because it speaks directly to your audience. It says, I know you, I've worked with you, I know exactly what you're going through, and I know how to get you to where you want to be. Why? Because I've done it before. And this is how I did it, right? So you're not talking about your stuff. You're saying, here's the context that your audience finds themselves in. What can I tell them that they will think, wow, do you know what? That's so obvious. Why didn't I ever think about it, right? And that's what
No,
you do.
absolutely. I mean, that is like for us, for instance, a myth that I like to demystify is the processes and procedures are called corporate and will actually stop creativity, which is not true, but you hear it, and it can be a block to actually systematizing a business and allowing it to scale. So I talk a lot about that and how to overcome that. So then leaders can use that in order to be able to create better systems for themselves and work with their staff on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, right? This isn't my phraseology. I've nicked it from somebody else, but I really like it, right? It's called results in advance. And what you're doing is through your content creation or however you are communicating with the market, you are seeding little bits of value that's riskless, right? So it's very low calories on the brain, right? Let's say you tell a story where you're able to demonstrate. I love this idea of myth busting, right? So we use that in our work as well. This idea that there's all these business myths that people are operating under that need to be busted, because once we get rid of them, we replace them with good information, then they'll actually make progress, right? But you can't give them too much information, because if you overburden them, it can feel scary to make the change, right? We know people don't like to change. And so you've got to give them low calorie, risk-free things that they can test that will get them just a little way further forward than they are today, right? And you do that because once somebody gets a little bit of momentum, then what's the next thing? And what's the next thing? And where are they going to come for that next thing? They're going to come to you because you've given them those results in advance. They haven't bought anything from you, right? You haven't got a commercial relationship with them. You've got a content relationship, which is based on value. And that little bit of value that gets them a little bit further forward, and then again and again and again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So where can let's say we have somebody listening right now and they're thinking, how am I going to come up with all those topics? What would be your answer?
So my answer would be that I'm launching a course in the new year that will help them do that. But
What's the
no,
name of the course?
the course is going to be called the Go-To Expert, and it is going to train people to uncover this information that they have. Because look, there are some phenomenal uh, platforms and tools out there that you can use to communicate with your audience, to build a platform, to distribute content, all of this stuff. That stuff actually, I mean, it's not easy, but it's the easier bit of it, right? Because once you have all the content, then you can just pump it through these tools, right? And it's all there for you. And with using AI, it's like boom, boom, boom. The challenge is coming up with the content. So that's the bit that I'm going to be working on.
It's very relevant, but being also very unique. So give me one question you would ask in your how to become a go-to expert in order
Right.
to actually untap some knowledge. Let's have like a teaser here. So what are give me one question or one tip that you will
So
say
so here
people can apply.
it's a great question. So this is what I typically do is I would say to you, okay, um, when people think about the challenges they face, right, they typically think about the external pressures that they believe are causing those problems, right? So we might say, oh, the economy is buggered, so of course I'm not selling, right? Or they might say the government is introducing new policies, right? So I can't achieve what I want to achieve, right? And actually, a lot of the time, as you found, the blockers are internal. It's their own behavior, it's their own beliefs that are stopping them. So I would say to an entrepreneur who's looking to develop their content, I would say, when you've worked with clients in the past and they've asked you to come in and solve problem X, right, which is for me is how do I get more visible, right? And you've asked them what are the problems, and they've told you, well, there's too much noise. We're competition, it's got too much money, too much budget, we could never compete, right? And you've actually worked with them and helped them achieve. What were the real problems that you uncovered? What were the beliefs, the behaviors that were actually getting in their way? So again, the example I gave earlier, the behavior, the belief was we need to sell our stuff and we need to promote the features and benefits of our stuff. And the behavior was over leveraging that in the content rather than focusing in on delivering valuable information that will demonstrate the relevance of your experience and expertise. So yeah, so what are the external problems they bring you? What are the internal problems that you actually solve for? And help bring those things to the surface.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. Okay, so Alex, you're definitely a go-to expert. So if people want to go to you to find out more, where would they go?
So at the moment, the main website is 9mmpublicrelations.com, 9mmpr.com. I'm on LinkedIn, but also I will be launching the Go-To Expert, and that will have its own website in the new year. So come and find me on LinkedIn, and I'll make it so that you know exactly when we're launching in the new year.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I would encourage our listeners to become go-to experts and leverage on what you know, answer people's questions. That actually remind me the episode I did with Marcus Sheridan about they ask you answer. You become an expert by answering questions. So I would also include that episode in the show notes because I think it's very important for people to really learn how to become experts. So thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you, Addie. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.